Penn State is going to check off a lot of boxes with this class of 2025.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We're talking Penn State recruiting here, as this is a primer for National Signing Day, the class of 2025. Wednesday, December 4th, this is where Penn State is going to begin finalizing the class. They can actually pick up some recruits here in the process afterwards. This is early national signing period. I want to know your thoughts down in the comments section. Be a part of the discussion. I'm going to share mine. Talk about overall what to like about this class, what they're doing, why they are checking all of these boxes, as I mentioned, and are they going to get any last-second flips? Let's start with, generally speaking, this is a top 15 class, and honestly, with the potential in this class, could be a top 10 group. That is what I genuinely think about this class, because Penn State checked a lot of boxes. They got a lot of needs. They got 4 offensive linemen, for example, 2 running backs, 4 wide receivers, a couple tight ends, one of which just committed very recently here, a quarterback in this class with the potential to get 2, a bunch of defensive backs as well, defensive ends, tons of defensive linemen. So that's what I mean. If they needed anything that Penn State needed for position groups, they got in this class, and it's loaded with potential. So most people are going to look at the rankings and say, okay, Penn State, for example, is number 17 according to 24/7 Sports. On3 has them ranked 15th. So generally speaking, this is a top 15 class based on the way it's ranked. But when all's said and done, based on the production of some of these players that they've gotten, Penn State has always been a team, a program under James Franklin that finds the diamond in the rough. A lot of these prospects are severely underrated. They have headline players that can become all-conference, maybe even all-American one day. That is some of the potential that I see. And I'll name some of those players here, but they built depth. They continue to stack classes. And why that's important is because in this day and age of college football, when you're competing against the transfer portal, NIL, these classes that Penn State has most recently gotten in 22, 23, 24, and now 25 here in the present, it's transfer portal proof. It is almost insurance to prevent this attrition from these outside sources. So Penn State is building, they are developing, and this is the game plan that they've gone with. And frankly, it works out very well. It has worked out well for this Penn State program. So let's talk about this class a little more in depth, these headline players, because they built depth. And then we'll talk about Brian Kordovich, who just committed to Penn State, that second tight end in the class. But the headline players are going to be Malachi Goodman, who becomes that, and I'm going off a consensus. This isn't On3, 24/7, Rivals, or ESPN. This is actually a combination of all of them. On3 gives a consensus rating based on all 4 of the resources. So you're getting a generally objective player review here. Malachi Goodman, offensive tackle, versatile as they get. He is the best prospect consensus for Penn State's class of 2025. Could play left tackle, could play right tackle, could play guard, either guard spot. And he comes in with an ideal size right away. He's already listed at 6'5", 315 pounds. That is college ready. That's college ready size. Honestly, my favorite prospect out of all of them. I'm just going through a couple of names here. These are the players that are at the top. We'll talk about each and every one of the prospects. Don't get me wrong here. Darius Dixon, out of Mater Dei in California. He's already playing for an elite program. Mater Dei is consistently one of the top schools in the state of California, as large as that state is. Also, one of the top schools in all of the nation. And kudos to Penn State for now, in this age, as the conference realignment, you can now expand your recruiting footprint, and Penn State's succeeding. How often does Penn State get a recruit from California? You have Troy Hune, that quarterback in the class of 2026, but we're talking about 2025 here. And Darius Dixon, one of the this is a player that I believe is truly underrated and will prove to be one of the best cornerbacks in the entire class of 2025, let alone Penn State specific class. But this is one of those headline players. He's physical. He has great ball skills, amazing footwork. As a senior currently in high school, and depending on how he develops, could play sooner rather than later. Penn State went heavy on defensive back because what it does is it's going to counter what Ohio State, Oregon, Washington, USC, what they like to do and go heavy on wide receiver. They like to be, spread offense, multiple wide receivers. How do you counteract that? Penn State did that by going and getting 2 top-tier corners as well as some other players we're going to talk about. Jameer Joseph is another headline prospect in this class of 2025. Out of the state of New Jersey, St. Joseph Regional, already ideal size for a cornerback. 6 foot, 185 pounds. He is the 3rd best consensus prospect for Penn State. That's a dynamic duo right there at corner. So you have both boundaries locked up. As long as Dixon and Joseph develop well together, that is a nice 1-2 punch. And it's going to be a matchup for years to come against those other schools that I've named: Oregon, Ohio State, Washington, USC, etc. Teams that like to spread the football out and go aerial or attack, or at least have the talent to do it. They have the capability to do it. So maybe not an Ohio State that would like to do it, because they're pretty balanced based on what we saw this past season. But when we look 2-3 years from now, when these players will be in their prime, hypothetically, that's going to be a matchup that Penn State is going to be able to take away those matchups with their pass defense. Another player to highlight here as the 4th best consensus player in the state of Pennsylvania, dominate the state. That's something we're going to talk about a little bit. The questions remaining about this class of 2025. Alex Tatch, 6'2" linebacker, athletic freak. Like I said, in the state of Pennsylvania, so that is a win in itself, attends Greater Latrobe High School. This was somebody that was under the radar, a player that was a late bloomer, if you will, because the recruiting rankings didn't catch up for a while. They didn't think much of an Alex Tatch, and it was kind of a question mark on an unknown prospect relatively at the time when he did commit. Is now one of the higher profile players in this class, and will be able to continue to carry the trend of linebacker U. He can be anything that you need him to be, really. I think he can play all 3 linebacker spots. I don't think he will play that number 11 where Abdul Carter was before he moved to defensive end. I think he is either your Mike linebacker or your Sam. I don't think he's going to be your Will. That's that off-ball linebacker that kind of does a little bit of everything. But Alex Tatch has the size, has the speed, has the smarts to be that all-encompassing Mike linebacker that I think he will project at nicely. Or adds the nice weight, can easily be that strong side linebacker to set the edge and defend the run. So those are the highest graded players for Penn State in this class of 2025. Let's talk about the most recent commitment, Brian Kordovich, and then we'll get to some last second flips. Brian Kordovich, athletic tight end, another player. What do they mostly have in common? I don't want to say all of them. What do they mostly have in common? They are just simply underrated. The rankings are all over the place. On 3 has Kordovich as a 4-star, a top 15 player at the tight end position. And then you look at 24/7, 45th. That is a wide margin. Rivals actually doesn't even have him ranked. He's a consensus 3-star player. But this is a guy that is going to be a matchup nightmare for teams down the stretch. If he develops well, he already comes in with a size of 6'4", 225 pounds. So this last second edition, I know everybody that follows Penn State recruiting is probably wondering, okay, what about Andrew Olish? We'll talk about those last second flips, but this is, I don't want to say consolation prize, but this is still a very valuable recruit and a commitment late in the cycle when you did not know if you were going to get a second tight end, let alone Andrew Olish, one of the top players in the state of Pennsylvania overall. But Penn State was looking to get a second tight end in this class, and I think they checked that box very well with adding Kordovich. We'll talk about the last second flips, including one that flipped away from Penn State, and other players to watch here over the next 24 hours and maybe even after this national signing period, including a second quarterback, an elite second quarterback. I'll tell you more on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks, and that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier than before. Game Time Picks filters out all of the fluff to show you only incredible deals on incredible seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And let's look at tickets on Game Time for the Big Ten Championship between Penn State and Oregon this Saturday. You can go to the Game Time app or go to gametime.co on your browser, and all the Game Time picks are filtered for me here. You can see the best deals right away. Take a look at this deal. It's a super deal, field end zone section, 127, row 11, all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, $101 per ticket for a conference championship game. If you're looking for the lowest price, it's a little higher up in Lucas Oil Stadium, Terrace Corner, section 604, row 11, but how about this price on Game Time? $22 per ticket. That's all in pricing with the no surprise fees. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So there could potentially be some flips to watch on National Signing Day, and maybe even after, both within Penn State's class and outside of Penn State's class, where they're trying to look to make an addition. So I want to start with Jaden Woods, who was committed to Penn State, who has already flipped his commitment away from Florida. That one stings. That one stings quite a bit. Jaden Woods was arguably the best overall prospect in the class of 2025, depending on where you looked, right across the services. I believe that Malachi Goodman and Darius Dixon would have been, I think they will be better. I think they will be better and offer better production than Jaden Woods, but that's not to deny the fact that he was still an elite caliber prospect, that he would have been disruptive, that he could have been that off-ball linebacker or defensive end. Truly had the capability of playing both. So he's flipped and committed to Florida and will most likely, again, this is going up, 12 hours before National Signing Day will begin to take place across college football. He will sign there and be a part of the class of Florida. But it doesn't hurt Penn State in the long run because, as I mentioned, they check so many boxes with this class. They have the linebackers, they have the defensive players committed to offset this loss. I look at LeVar Arrington II. I look at Alex Tatch. I look at Cam Smith. Other prospects like Deshaun Burnett, Cortez Harris. These are Chaz Coleman, who we'll get to more in just a moment here. All of those players as these edge defenders that can be a defensive end, that could move back to that off-ball linebacker spot. This versatility, at the end of the day, they are just top of the line defensive prospects. So you would still like a player like Jaden Woods to be committed in the class of 2025 if you're Penn State. But it is not the end of the world by any stretch of the imagination. They will be okay with what they have committed with those other defensive prospects and the potential that they possess. I bring up Chaz Coleman and I single him out because he was rumored to flip to Ohio State. He's from the state of Ohio. Ohio State had offered him right after Penn State secured his verbal commitment. It seems like that has cooled down a little bit. I don't have any inside information myself. That's just a name to watch on National Signing Day until there is pen to paper. There is the allure, as Penn State, or Ohio State, I should say, did lose a commitment from Zahir Mathis. He decommitted. He was one of the top defensive ends in their class. He's one of the top prospects in the state of Pennsylvania. That is a flip to watch here. I have a longer list, but Chaz Coleman, just keep an eye on Coleman in case Ohio State tries to make a last-second push. But for the most part, it seemed like Ohio State was going to flip him. And then in a matter of days, things turned around. The momentum swung back into Penn State's favor. Let's get to Zahir Mathis, because this was a player, the second he decommitted from Ohio State, I said, Penn State's got to target him. There is no reason for, as much as they tried to push for him to already get a flip, the amount of visits that he had over the course of the offseason and all that work for nothing. Based on the discourse, it seems like Penn State and Zahir Mathis are not on the same wavelength here, that it is unlikely to happen. Mathis is more likely to end up at a Colorado or potentially an SEC school when all is said and done. Penn State is just not in the running as much. It seemed like it was just Ohio State and Penn State decommitted from Ohio State, and now it's a completely different story. And Penn State it seems like both sides are not working out in the recruiting conversation. So Mathis, if he ends up at Penn State, great, because I think that's a player that can develop and be an elite talent. But at this moment in time, it looks like both sides are far from a commitment. The player needs to commit to the school just as much as the school needs to commit to the player. So I think that's what people might not know about the recruiting industry here, is that a player might want to commit to a university, but if the school doesn't want that commitment, then it doesn't happen. But I think both sides here are looking in different directions. As you can see with the Chaz Coleman commitment and Penn State pushing to secure that commitment on National Signing Day. Brandon Finney was another name that has popped up on Penn State's radar quite a bit. Committed to Oregon back in June. It looked like all the signs pointed to Penn State, and it seemed like all the signs still pointed to Penn State. There is actually still the expectation. For example, On3 has Finney flipping to Penn State. And, well, we're getting closer to pen to paper National Signing Day. When is it going to happen? I feel like this flip has been in the works for, 2-3 weeks now? It's been a long time. When is it going to happen? Brandon Finney as a prospect, you get your third elite cornerback. Jameer Joseph, Darius Dixon, you could argue that Brandon Finney would be the top overall prospect in this class, jumping a Malachi Goodman even as that offensive lineman. Brandon Finney is that good. You would get 3 elite playmakers as defensive backs, and there's no reason to say that these guys couldn't be safety either, but they all project right now as cornerbacks. I mean, that would be you want to talk about taking away a passing game from an opponent. Get Brandon Finney to join Darius Dixon and Jameer Joseph, and you have an elite trio for years to come if you are Penn State. Lex Cyrus is a name that everybody is all too familiar with. Just in short, it seems like he is going to stay committed to South Carolina. He likes what's going on down there. That was a player that Penn State needed in its core of wide receivers, but now with 4 total commitments, it does not become a need anymore. And the loss of Lex Cyrus as an in-state prospect does not hurt as much. And that's where a commitment like Kobe Howard is very important for Penn State. We'll keep going with wide receivers. Why not? Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter he showed up at Penn State recently, late in the season, for an on-campus visit. Penn State's been pushing for him. Certainly, he would vault to the top of Penn State's class of 2025. I think that he's going to no inside information here. I just think that the writing is on the wall that he will stick with Ohio State, committed to Ohio State a long time ago. And never say never, because Penn State has not given up, but I think it's safe to say that he's going to commit to Ohio State. I've mentioned an Andrew Olish. The commitment of Kordovich changes these things. Oregon is also trying to flip another tight end. I think that Andrew Olish, after seeming to shop around a little bit, took a visit to Oregon, took a constant conversations with Penn State. He's committed to Michigan since the summer. That's probably going to stay with the Wolverines. And then how about the possibility of a second quarterback in this class, an elite one at that? Bryce Baker, who took a last-second visit to Penn State and saw that bludgeoning of Maryland, top 10 quarterback in the country. Could Penn State add him? We'll talk about that and the questions remaining around this class, plus going through the class one final time so that you're familiar with every single commitment here for 2025. Tell you more about it on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet just $5 and you will get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more. And it's all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. And let's look at the lines for Penn State versus Oregon in the Big Ten championship game over on FanDuel.com. Oregon is a 3.5-point favorite against Penn State. Oregon is -170 on the money line. The Nittany Lions are +140. The total is set at 49.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them right now at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And let's wrap up here with the possibility of a second quarterback. Talk about the players one by one to go through this entire class. Bryce Baker, an elite quarterback prospect. That was one of the question marks here about this 2025 class, because Penn State missed on its ideal target in Matt Zollers. And that's not to say that Beckham Kritza isn't a quality prospect, but Drew Aller, Bo Prabula, Ethan Grunkmeyer, Jackson Smolik, in the age of the transfer portal, and Drew Aller's eventually going to go off to the NFL, you need a strong quarterback depth chart. You never know what's going to happen. Smolik dealing with the long-term injury, right? Wasn't exactly available over at this point in time. Ethan Grunkmeyer has technically been quarterback number 3. So it's about Penn State building depth and building quality competition. Bryce Baker, top 10 quarterback consensus in the country. There's a lot to like about Baker. He would have been the headline prospect for the North Carolina Tar Heels, but he was committed to Mack Brown and the leadership for Mack Brown, and that's all gone since they're going in a different direction. So he's opened back up his recruitment. It seemed like it was down to Penn State and North Carolina, and he took this last second visit. But now LSU is in the mix. Oh, why is LSU in the mix? Well, they need a last second plan here. They certainly need to find a way to make up for the loss of Bryce Underwood, who is the consensus top quarterback, who accepted a hefty NIL deal as it's been reported. Barstool Sports has bragged about it. Dave Portnoy, who was heavily involved in those negotiations, if you will. But Bryce Underwood was committed to LSU. Seems like they could not match the NIL offer from Michigan, and now Bryce Underwood is staying home. So LSU is without an elite quarterback. So I think this is a head-to-head battle between Penn State and LSU primarily, but I don't want to sit here and say that North Carolina is not in the race, because they certainly are. So it's down to those 3 schools. I do think that Penn State and LSU are in the lead. We will see if Penn State can fend off LSU. What is interesting, though, is that Bryce Baker says he is delaying his commitment past National Signing Day. And that's why I've talked about we need to differentiate between the early national signing period and the late national signing period. You can sign after December 4th here. So that's what Bryce Baker plans to do. Since so much has changed, I don't blame him for biding his time. But like I said, LSU is going to be aggressive with its NIL. If they believe that Bryce Baker is a quality quarterback prospect, he's proven that. We'll see what Penn State is able to do with its recruiting strategy up against Brian Kelly and the Tigers. You can certainly bank on that LSU is going to be some stiff competition for the likes of Bryce Baker. I just want to address some questions about this group. There's a lot of positives to like, but for Penn State, they don't necessarily have that elite playmaker. At least that's something that's going to be called out about this class of 2025. Is there that true elite playmaker? Because they don't have any 5 stars in this class. There are some quality 4 stars. There's a lot of 4 stars in terms of that mid-range, if you will, and then a couple 3 stars here and there. Remember, when players get to college campuses, those recruiting rankings, those star ratings do not matter. That's a thing of the past the second that they enroll early and anything else. What I do agree with is that there's a wide range of outcomes here for Penn State's class of 2025. Because as much as I see the potential in these players, at the same time, there is the opportunity that they don't develop the way that they're supposed to. But these are all on an individual case-by-case basis. They all have different skills. They all have different backgrounds of playing ability. And it's the point of Penn State to develop them properly. And so if somebody, for example, has all the intangibles in the world, but needs to refine some athleticism, needs to get more athletic, put on some size, they got to work with them in that regard. Or somebody that's an athletic freak, but probably needs to get a little better with the X's and O's. There's a wide variety of players with those different skill sets that are going to come to Penn State, but they don't have that 5-star player. They don't have that player that at the end of the day is going to, I believe in a Malachi Goodman and a Darius Dixon to kind of change that description. I think those are the players that can be really difference makers and be those elite guys. It's like I said, it's about how high the ceiling and how low of a floor. And that's my point about this Penn State class of 2025, is that it can be a top 10 class based on the results, or if things don't exactly go well, it can't. So there's a spectrum that it can be great as Penn State expects it to be, or else they wouldn't take all these commitments, or it can be below expectations here. So there's a little bit of a wide range of outcomes when it comes to this class of 2025. How did they do in the state of Pennsylvania? That was another concern. So Penn State really turned it around with its commitments in the class of 2025. An Alex Tatch, a Jabri Wallace-Coleman, a player like Cam Smith, right? They were getting players that Deshaun Burnett, they were getting guys that at first it seemed like they were losing out on the top prospects in Pennsylvania, and then they circled back around and they were able to do that successfully. So it wasn't exactly the dominate the state, if you will. 2026 is off to a great start there, but 2025, it certainly was you had to play the long game and be patient for Penn State to circle back around and get these players from the state of Pennsylvania. So now let's look at the class of 2025 as a whole, going through every single player, position, and star grade. Talked about Malachi Goodman as that 4-star offensive lineman, Darius Dixon as that 4-star cornerback, Jameer Joseph, 4-star cornerback, Alex Tatch as that 4-star linebacker. Jabri Wallace-Coleman, in-state running back, 4-star, Matthew Alton, wide receiver, could honestly play any position, really. He is listed as an athlete, but he is projecting to be a wide receiver. Matthew Alton, 4-star wide receiver. LeVar Arrington II. If you're not familiar with that name, yes, that is the son of the great LeVar Arrington, one of the greatest linebackers in college football history. His son is attending Penn State University, 4-star linebacker. And then another linebacker, 4-star Cam Smith out of New Jersey, St. Joe's Prep. Yvonne Kemaju, he's listed as an edge defender, but he is going to be a defensive tackle, 6'3", 240 pounds presently, out of the state of Maryland. Matt Henderson, 4-star tight end, 6'5", 210 pounds. Lyric Samuel, Penn State needed wide receivers in this class. Marcus Higgins did an incredible job securing 4 different wide receiver commitments. Lyric Samuel, 6'4", 175 pounds presently, will certainly need to add some weight, but as a 4-star wide receiver, has a lot of speed. He's 6'4" and has tons and tons of speed. He might be the fastest player overall in this class. Another wide receiver, Jeff Exener, 6'2", 215 pounds, so he's got some size. He's probably the strongest wide receiver in this class, out of the state of Maryland, McDonough High School, which has been good to Penn State recruiting. Mentioned Deshaun Burnett before, edge defender out of the state of Pennsylvania. Consensus 3-star, but in other places, a 4-star defender across the board at the likes of 24/7, Rivals, and ESPN. Cortez Harris, a 3-star edge defender, 6'2", 200 pounds, out of the state of Maryland. Owen Alasini, offensive tackle, 6'8". The frame on Owen Alasini, 6'8", 260 pounds, a 3-star out of Connecticut. Kobe Howard, another wide receiver, 3-star out of the state of Florida, 5'11", 190 pounds. A lot of talent. He is just a quality football player across the board. Talked about Chaz Coleman, edge defender, 3-star. I don't agree with the 3-star rating here. He's just underneath that 4-star rating. On 3, 24/7, and ESPN have him as a 4-star. Rivals has him as a 3-star, but the consensus rating puts him as a 3-star out of the state of Ohio. Tyke Hayes, another running back in this class of 2025. Running back out of the state of Pennsylvania, 5'10", 190 pounds, attends Aliquippa. Xavier Thomas out of Central Catholic, defensive back, 5'11", 170 pounds, a 3-star, but a 4-star according to 24/7 Sports. Will be that slot cornerback for Penn State. Brady O'Hara, currently listed as a tight end. He'll be an offensive tackle, 3-star out of North Catholic High School in Pennsylvania. Braswell Thomas, 6'2" safety, 185 pounds, out of New Jersey, a 3-star safety. Randy Adarica, Penn State going to Florida to get a commitment from Randy Adarica, somebody we talked about a lot over the summer. 6'3", 280 pounds. Again, he is a 3-star. Talking about Brian Kordovich, 3-star on the consensus rating, out of the state of Ohio, 6'4", 225 pounds. Beckham Kritza, quarterback, 6'5", 190 pounds, a 3-star, who's bounced back and forth between the state of Colorado and the state of Florida during his high school career. Michael Troutman out of the state of New Jersey, interior offensive lineman, 6'2", 280 pounds, most likely projects as a center. Penn State got a center in this class. That's Michael Troutman. And then the last prospect in terms of the consensus ratings, but Penn State if they take their commitment, that means they are a valuable prospect here. Josh Johnson, 3-star cornerback, 6'2", good size, 185 pounds out of the state of Ohio. That is your recruiting primer for Penn State on early National Signing Day. Again, this class could get even better after the early National Signing period here. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section about this class of 2025. That'll do it here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family, and if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations about everything. Penn State football recruiting, wrestling, men's basketball. It's all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.